Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and today I speak with Chris Parry. Now, Chris started and grew her own leadership development consultancy from 0 to 10 million in revenue in just a few short years, growing a fantastic working culture into the bargain. And now she advises other consultancy leaders on how to build a successful and sustainable business. And we covered so much on today's call, and we had a lot of fun doing it. Let's jump in. Chris Parry, welcome to the Consultancy Edge.
Thank you very much, Matt. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, great to have you here. I've been really looking forward to our chat. Listen, I know from experience that your route into consulting was actually quite an unusual one, wasn't it? We think of people coming from the consultancy world, maybe, exiting a larger consultancy, setting up their own thing because they've been inspired. That wasn't your journey, was it?
It really wasn't. I mean, my background, I did computer science. That was my degree. This is the late 80s, so things were very different then. But I was fascinated by computers. I thought they were going to be so important in the future, and I didn't understand them at all. So that's how I got into that. And then I was sponsored actually by British Gas. And then after I worked with them, I went to work for a bank in IT. I was a systems programmer, like really right at literally in the basement, dealing with the sort of the nuts and bolts of the systems. All male environment. I was really passionate about women getting into computing. I couldn't understand why such a lucrative and brilliant career was virtually, in my experience, like 100% male. So to be honest, I was a bit of a campaigner. I used to do a lot of quite activist. I was in the union. I was really outraged that women weren't getting these opportunities. So that's where I was. And then completely by chance, there was a job advertised internally in the bank, ostensibly equal opportunities, but it was a move into HR. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And anyhow, I went for it, got the job. And I don't honestly quite know how I got the job because I knew nothing about HR, but I did have a lot of strong views. And it turned out that we had this, I mean, I got to know him really well. The CEO at the time was a really forward-looking, developmental sort of person. And what worried him was he looked at his senior people and they were all from the same background, white men. And he could see they were all coming up for retirement and he didn't know where the next generation was coming from. And he wanted someone to come in and work out, how do we get more women, just more diversity into management? And it turned out that there was a board presentation had been booked. And I was expected to give it. I think I had 4 months from joining to making the presentation about what was the strategy for this business going forward to transform its leadership development, really, and succession planning. So it was a huge learning curve. But what a fantastic opportunity it gave me. I mean, I guess I moved really into internal consultancy initially. Really got the bug for it. I love doing it. I met my partner actually because I went out to sort of find out what was the best thinking in leadership development. And I met him. He was at London Business School doing really great research into the future of leadership in a complex dynamic environment. So we worked together. And I worked my way for about 5 years. I was in the bank, got to quite a senior level. But it sort of hit the bureaucratic limits at a certain point. I thought, I really don't want to be in this environment. I want to set out on my own, which is how I then set up my own consultancy business.
Fantastic. What a shame that we're still having the conversation about getting women into computing and STEM and diversity and equality, inclusion is still such a thing that we've
don't tell me, Matt. So much has changed and so little as well. Yeah,
I didn't know that we got the British Gas connection as well, because that's where I first cut my teeth straight out of school.
Oh, there you go. Oh no, I was there. I was one of they call them scholars, and they sent us to go and do our degree, and I went back to work with them. So yeah, they were good days.
Yeah. So you set up your leadership development consultancy, which was the Centre for High Performance Development.
Yes.
And talk to me about the journey, because I know where it sort of ended up, but tell us about the early experiences of that, growing the consultancy from obviously in a position where you hadn't done anything like that before at that stage.
Nothing like that. And I mean, we just had this amazing belief in ourselves. When I look back, I think, why do we have this belief in ourselves? We didn't really know anything. We didn't know what we didn't know, but we thought we did have a fantastic offering. We did have something really different in the market that was making a difference. So we set off on our own. And I mean, the biggest challenge was when you move from being into a big name bank where you've got a big budget, anyone will come and talk to you. And he was at London Business School again. You know, anyone will go and talk to you. When it's just you, Parry and Cockerell, sitting in, you know, your home office, it was really, really hard. And I think, you know, where again, sort of serendipity. I got a message from somebody who knew me and my partner from our bank days, and he said, "Oh, I hear you've left the bank. Really interested in learning about your new venture, and maybe we could partner together." So we ended up going into a joint venture together. And I'll tell you what, I nearly didn't go to that meeting. It was like it was a wet Thursday morning. And I said, "Oh, do we really want to go into London to meet, you know?" I'm so glad I did because we got together and we set up a joint venture and we just leapfrog. Our development just took off like crazy in the first year. So yeah, that was just one of those unpredictable strokes of luck, I have to say, Matt. Yeah.
Incredible. And I mean, you spoke there about the inability perhaps to get into the room when you are a small consultancy. A lot of our listeners will be in that position and have struggled with business development, some of them for many years, I know. So how did you kind of break through that? What were some of the pivotal moments that, you know, those joint ventures, and perhaps there are some lessons there for a lot of our
Yeah.
listeners, but how did you go about getting into the room?
Well, I think, you know, that this is where I mean, I really am a big believer in partnerships. If you can develop good strategic partnerships, and I mean, that's easier said than done, but this one worked really well until it didn't, by the way. But the way it worked was the company we were partnered with, they were just the opposite to us. They'd been around 25 years. They had a client list to die for, and they were doing about £5,000 with each of them, and they had nothing to sell. And we thought, well, we've got everything to sell, but we don't have clients. So they literally just took us into all their clients. We just developed this blue chip client list that we would never have got into on our own. So yeah, that our strategy was very much go into partnership. You know, they had something we needed, we had something they needed, and yeah, it was sweet, really sweet, for quite a few years.
Excellent. And what I mean, obviously there must have been some of the sort of more challenging times. What were some of those unexpected challenges that perhaps that you faced early on in your consultancy journey?
Um, well, I mean, I think some of the early challenges were just we were quite inexperienced. So, I mean, I remember the first workshop that I ran. I had all these senior leaders in the room, and we'd kind of sold this big program, and they came along. They were there for a week. And one of them said to me when they arrived, he said, "Look, you've got till lunchtime, and if I'm bored, I'm off. I've got really important business to do." So I
Right.
was like, "Oh, okay." I'll try and make sure that you don't leave. And he didn't, and they didn't either. But yeah, there were some of those kind of experiences. Um, I mean, more on a strategic level, we hit a point with our partners where we either really needed to bring the whole thing together or go our separate ways. Um, and I spent 3 months working with them on developing new a new business. We were going to bring the whole lot together. And literally on the final sign off at the board meeting, one by one, they said, "We don't think this is going to work. We think there's a culture clash. It's not for us." So it all fell apart, which was kind of devastating, but also I'm so glad it happened that side of the signing and not the other side. So we ended up going out off on our own after that, and we bought our share out. Um, and yeah, that was the next stage in the journey, really. Yeah.
Amazing. And what was the first really big win, do you think? I mean, you spoke about the partnership and the benefits that brought, but was there a particular highlight in your consultancy career where perhaps it was a big client win, a big sort of deal? What comes to
Oh
mind?
well, the one that sticks most in my mind it was actually a tender process, which I've never been really that crazy about tenders, but we went down this tender process. It took so much time and so many resources, but we got down to the final shortlist. went into the room to do the presentation, and it went really well, and we won the deal. And it was a 5 year multi-level. It was our first, what we used to call them, giant clients, clients of more than £1 million. Yeah, I mean, we had a lot of celebrations then. I still remember the feeling of winning that deal. It's funny, the emotions you remember, don't you? You remember the ones you lose as well. They kind of, you feel gutted, but when you win it, it's just such a great feeling.
Was that the
Uh,
first of many tenders? You mentioned a bit of sort of reticence around that, and I know that many who are listening in will share that, because there's still so much consultancy new business that comes via RFP, that there's high procurement sort of requirements and tenders and what have you. Did that become sort of part of your journey, or were you largely able to swerve that, and if so, how?
well, I think we through our journey, procurement started getting more and more of an influence. I think in the earlier stages, it was less so. It was easy to go and sell to the line, was our preference. It got more and more difficult, and we just had to get on to preferred supplier lists, and that was the way in. And then once you're a preferred supplier, you don't mind going for the RFPs, because you are a legitimate player. You're not just being put in there as a sort of just you're not really there to be selected. You're just there to make the numbers up.
Yeah, because it can be just an idea generation exercise.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. I must. We never really cracked the public sector tenders either. So I'm in awe of consultancies that really get good at that, because I think that is a challenge.
Yeah, it is a real skill for sure.
Mm.
Chris, I'm curious, what were some of the most kind of surprising lessons that you learned early on in your journey? I think that a lot of people, consultancy leaders generally, have to be very resilient. What lessons did you pick up along the way?
Um, I think that the thing I learned very early on, actually, because I was, when I first got into consulting, it was as an internal consultant, really, and I was very young. I was female in a very male organization, and I saw all these senior people out there, and they were sort of vaguely terrifying. And actually, what I learned is, no, they're just human beings like us, with all their faults. I know this sounds so trite now, but when you're first working with clients, they can be quite intimidating. And I just realized that they're not. They're just humans, and if you can find what's causing them pain, or how you can add value, then you can be really good. You can make a great relationship with them.
Yeah, I
So
think that's one of the things that we see, obviously, in my positioning work with consultancies. We often find there's an imbalance in the client supplier relationship, and I guess that kind of sums it up, really. That often consultancies aren't seen as a true extension of the team, that are on a level with the client. Have you got any sort of practical tips or observations around that might help?
Well, one thing we tried to do is we tried to have multi-level relationships. So you'd match people at different levels. So, as the business grew, I would like to try and maintain the sort of the very senior leadership relationships. And then other people in my team would take people at their level. And that actually worked really well, because rather than, one person trying to manage all the different levels, you kind of match them a bit more, and they got on really well. So I think that was definitely one way I found of leveling the pitch a little bit, if you like.
And I know, just going back to your journey at the CHPD, you went on, of course, to sell that business after 10 years,
Mhm.
building it from the ground up, from 0 to 10 million
Yeah.
in revenue. Tell us about that journey of growth, and perhaps with a mind towards the kind of consultancy edge. What is the edge to create that
Yeah.
sort of growth? But also tell us about that journey of exiting as well.
Well, first to start, the journey is not a straight line, that is for sure. We had massive peaks and troughs. We nearly went out of business twice. So there were two really difficult times where I thought we weren't gonna make it. And then we had some other periods where we had great growth. So it goes in stages for sure. I think one of the big breakthroughs was, yeah, and every consultancy that I work with finds this. You get to a point where you haven't exhausted, but you can't just rely on your network and your referrals to build your business. you need something else. You need this kind of lead machine that you know how many people you've got to speak to and how, so it becomes much more of a process. And I think as we started putting that into place, that was a breakthrough because it just evened out some of the massive peaks and troughs, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, getting the sales and marketing right was a key part of the journey. We
And
did quite a
reflecting,
bit. Sorry, Mike, go on.
so I was going to say, reflecting on those two times that you mentioned where you did sail
Yeah.
a bit close to the wind, perhaps, was that were there environmental factors at play there? Do you think that was it tied to that realization that perhaps you were over reliant on referrals? What do you think were the kind of reasons for those two
Well,
two?
the first time, and this was really did change our strategy. The first time was because we were overly reliant on one sector, and they hit it down. It was the financial services. They hit it down. They're always boom and bust. You know, when they've got money, they'll fly you to New York, you know, for the day. And when they didn't, you know, you would hardly get a cup of tea, you know. So we were too reliant on them, and we lost a lot of revenue, which we couldn't easily replace. So that led us to being I mean, I think in some consultancies have to specialize in their sector, and some sectors are much more recession proof than others. But we became pretty much agnostic in terms of the sector we were in, as long as it was a dynamic, complex environment that needed leaders,
Mm.
then it was relevant to us. So we really did. You know, we got into a lot of other sectors. That was the first time.
Yeah.
The second time was, I think, a combination of things. Again, you know, losing a large client, having our eye off the ball a little bit. I mean, it's really crazy things like just not staying on top of, you know, chasing invoices.
Mm.
You know, really, that's another thing I think I discovered, that you need a really good finance person. If you have a really good finance person, they keep you out of trouble, definitely.
Yeah.
So we did after that second time, we did get a really good finance director and made sure that would never happen again.
Yeah, you have to get comfortable with the dull stuff, don't you? That has to
Yeah.
happen. But of course, we have a happy ending with all of this, Chris. And as I say, you
Yeah.
grew it to 10 million, and
Yeah.
I mean, it was a staged exit for you, wasn't it? Because actually, you remained with the business for quite some time through two further acquisitions. Is that right?
Yeah, actually, that's right. So we sold it initially to a PE-backed American firm. Um, I actually didn't have an earn out as such. I wasn't tied in, but it became clear quite quickly that this firm was getting into trouble with their American business, and they asked us to come back in. So I did. I came back in, and we worked with them, and we helped them to, you know, sell their business basically to a much bigger American firm. And I did stay with them for a while, but that was like going back into a corporate world. So it was really interesting because it was to see your business part of a much bigger business it's interesting because for some people there were fantastic opportunities. For others, it was just not where they wanted to be. So yeah, each step it was a new set of learnings, I think.
Wonderful. And I know that many consultancy leaders would admit that they're aiming for some sort of exit at some stage. What do you think are some of the most important sort of levers to pull when trying to go for that sort of ultimate aim? What are some of the more prevalent things you have to keep in mind if you're growing to sell?
Well, I think the first thing is you've got to plan well ahead. It's no good waiting till you're like 3 years from retirement saying, I think I want to sell this now. I mean, I was really lucky because I met one of our mutual contacts, Paul Collins. I met him about halfway into our journey, I think, and he at the time was working on his equity growth wheel, and we were in fact the very first client that used it. And I found that just such a fantastic template for me because it looked at these are the things that a buyer will be looking at when you come to sell your business. And by the way, whether you sell or not, these things will make your business much better anyway. And that was really that sort of provided the template for us to grow. Each year we would tackle a different challenge, you know, on the growth wheel. So
Yeah.
highly
Yeah.
recommend that.
Yeah, it's a fantastic resource. I've also gained a lot of inspiration on that along those lines with the book Built to Sell by John Warrillow.
Yes.
Really
Yeah.
well told story, and just talks about those elements that you have to have in place to have inherent value. Um,
Yeah, and I mean, I think what's great about it, Matt, is that you should be doing them anyway, whether you want to sell or not, because that's how you've got to build. Once you've gone past that kind of the founder and a small team, filling their diaries, to 100%, and you start wanting to kind of build a team, then you've got to also build the infrastructure that goes around that and the systems and the processes, and that's how you kind of build a really sustainable business that's valuable.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's exactly what it comes down to, isn't it?
mm.
Wonderful. So Chris, I mean, yeah, so through that onward journey, you now, of course, you consult other consultancies and help them to grow. And of course, we got connected through the Consultancy Growth Network, which is a
Yeah.
fantastic resource, of course. What are you finding in the marketplace? What are you finding in the consultancy space are some of the greatest challenges that leaders are facing right now?
I think it's the same as they always are. It's how you break out from that cycle of like you're delivering, and then there's nothing in the pipeline, and so then we've got to all scrabble back and try and sell, and then we need to deliver. So it's that. I also see firms expanding too quickly. That's something we did too. Raising your fixed cost too fast.
And we've seen
And
some of the big boys do that recently, of course, as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's easy to do because you get excited and you think, oh, great, we'll invest here and we'll do that, and suddenly you find that you've got 3 months, of a pipeline that doesn't look like it's going to sustain those people, and having to lose people, I think, is a horrible thing to go through. So I see that as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm seeing quite a few firms at the moment that are trying to pass on, move from founder to maybe to the chair post and bring someone else in. So that's I'm working with a few firms trying to do that, which is always a challenge, but um, I think some of them are doing some really, really good jobs on that.
Great.
Let's
And
go with the baby.
yeah, you and I were talking earlier about, of course, the sort of fluctuations, should we say, in the market in recent times. I think it's fair to say that as we're speaking right now in late 2024, it has been a challenging time for many consultancies, but it feels like there may be an uptick as well, and we're heading in the right direction finally. But and when we reflect on building a valuable business, one that is built to sell, if you like, and all of that, what else do you think is important when it comes to being a resilient consultancy that can ride those waves, whatever the market conditions might be?
Well, I think I mean this obviously happened to me several times in our business. I think you've got to be really close to your client and what matters to them. So we were selling, ways to find and develop great leaders. And the message you give out is different. If the clients are in a recession, it's a slightly different message from, you're basically saying you need these leaders to survive. Whereas when things are going great, well, you need these leaders for growth and innovation. And so I think having real empathy with the client and what they're going through is the most important thing. Because if you just keep trying blindly to sell your services without, understanding the context that they're in, you're going to get nowhere. So that
Yeah.
was one important thing. In terms of being resilient as well, I think that's very much part of the culture. You need your people to really get behind each other when things are down, when things are tight, and really pull out all the extra stops. So you need that sort of collaborative culture, I think, where people really do give their all when times are tough.
And just picking up on that, because one of the things I've experienced as a leader, being completely open about it, is that when the chips are down, when the times are a little tougher, then that comes through in your leadership style. And I think there's huge importance in being a consistent leader. What are your tips for maintaining that when you know that sort of, the house is burning, but you kind of have to keep that poker face? What are
Yeah.
some of your
Well, I,
advice?
I mean, I was really lucky because we always had a culture in our because we gave a lot of feedback to clients, like very personal feedback on their leadership behaviors. I had a view that people in our company should also get very open and honest feedback as well. So we always had a lot of feedback in the business, and I got feedback early on that people knew if I was stressed or in a bad mood, they knew, because I would just walk through, I'd ignore everybody. I'd be really kind of, and I was complete, I just didn't realize I was doing this at all. So I suddenly realized that, gosh, when you are the leader of a business, they watch you, they're scrutinizing you, they're looking for clues about what's going on, because you know everything, and you have to make sure that you understand what's being presented to staff. So I think I got pretty good at communicating the message and always setting the theme for the quarter or the year. Maybe we're growing, maybe we're preparing for a big change, maybe we're having to batten down the hatches because times are tight. So I would always try and set the context, and then within that be as open as possible. Because I think what causes people terrible stress is when they don't know what's going on and they worry about what does it mean for me.
Yeah, I think there's
Um,
great power in that, and this idea of radical transparency. And I
yeah.
wonder how far you would go with that. How much information should you share with your staff, and also reflecting on the fact that a lot of consultancy is now built around associates. So who has to know how much, Chris? Would you say?
I think it does depend on the organization. We veered more to transparency than not. So we did share a lot of financial data, um, even salary data. Some organizations, that's a step too far. I'm talking to someone at the moment, and we're just trying to test, well, how far do you want to go? You want this open, transparent culture, but are you prepared to share the the real financials? Um, you're balancing. You don't want to scare people. You don't want them saying, "Oh my God, this business is going under. I'm off." But on the other hand, I think it helps hugely if they do understand what the challenge is, and you always end with a positive message, and some confidence. And
Yeah,
if you are going to have to lose people, just do it fast, get it over with, and then rebuild. Don't drag it out.
yeah, rip off the band-aid, so to speak.
Yeah.
We do talk a lot about financial success in business, Chris, and we've obviously talked about growing to sell and that whole side of
Yeah.
things. But what over time, how have your understanding of goals and your definition of success in consultancy, how has that evolved?
I think it just got so much more nuanced. I mean, I know this will sound crass, but when my partner and I sat down to say, could we build a business? We literally were like almost the back of an envelope, right? This is a service we'd sell. We can sell it for this much. This is what it will cost to employ people to do it. What's the difference? Oh, yeah, there's enough there. We can make a business. So that's how we started. Like, can we make profit? And obviously we quickly realized that there are many dimensions. So for instance, let's say when you're looking at how you're going to resource a project, there's obviously the gross profit, how much does this person cost and what you charging the client. There's also, what does the client expect? There's also, are you building a diverse team into the client rather than just putting the same people in there?
Mm.
Are you developing skills of your people, or are you just using your most skilled person because that will keep the client happy? What does the consultant want to do? Is that the sort of work they want to do? Are they feeling overloaded? So I like the idea of there's an I, we, and an it. So the it is all the task stuff, all the numbers, the metrics, all the kind of the hard stuff. Then there's the we, which is relationships, it's the culture, it's the team, it's the values that you have. And then there's the I, which is how we as individual human beings are feeling and thinking and motivated. And those things are going on all the time, whether you like it or not. So if you only speak one of those languages, you're not going to be successful. You've got to be fluent in all of them. So yeah, much, much more nuanced.
And I guess there's this aspect of people um, growing your team, yes, but also growing a happy team. You've had great success with that. You've been recognised for it. In fact, I know in the past. How important is it to tie the success of the business to the success of your people, to give that sort of vision for the future, give them that path of how you're helping the whole, the collective?
Well, I mean, for us, the sort of people that came to work for us, we deliberately didn't go down the route of employing the sort of McKinsey consultants. Because my own experience told me that if you've got the right kind of values and attitude, that's much more important, and people can be trained. So we had a real mix of people that came in from all sorts of backgrounds, but they were all very motivated by doing something really valuable for the world. And for us, it was improving the standard of leadership, because, you improve leadership, you improve everyone's happiness, and you create much better organizations. So they were very motivated by that. They were very motivated about learning and developing, because that's how we recruited people that wanted to learn and develop. And I used to have to spend a bit of my time saying, look, we want to do those things, but to do that, we also have to make money. They all go together. It's not an either or, it's and. So yeah, I spent a lot of time kind of showing you can't have any of those on their own. They all have to go together. I still passionately believe that as well now. I think it's much more well understood now as well.
So successful consultancies have to have their cake and eat it in every respect, then, by the
I,
sounds.
I really think so. And I
Fantastic.
think just another thing on when you talk about how you measure the success, yes, some people want to build a business and sell it and make a certain amount of money, but um, I can now look at things from a much longer perspective. So my firm it's not around anymore. It's all over the place. But the people, the clients, the work we did have had a lasting impact, and the people have gone on to do amazing things. And that really matters to me so much more now than how much money can I make out of the business. It's so important.
And is there an element of legacy there, Chris, do you feel, when you reflect on that? What you've just described sounds very much like legacy to me.
Yeah, it does feel like that. In some small way, you've impacted on someone's own career and their future, or you've impacted on the way they've learnt and grown in their job, and how they then treat their people. So it has this domino effect. You have a much bigger effect than perhaps you realize at the time, definitely than you realize at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think many leaders need to remember that, the impact that they've created, but for so many people in their journey to where they've
Yeah.
got to. As we reflect on that future vision as well, Chris, I'm keen to get your observations in your current role as a non-exec, as an advisor.
Yeah.
What are some of the most exciting trends that you're currently observing in the consultancy world, and and why do they matter? What's really happening out there?
Well, obviously, I'm going to say AI. I mean, I've been fascinated by it for decades anyway. It's been around for a long time. I think that there's been so much hype. It's been hyped up so many times, but I honestly think this time it's different. I think that the machine learning algorithms, they're so powerful now, and more importantly, it's on your phone. I mean, I think someone said that ChatGPT was downloaded by 100 million people in the first 2 months. So suddenly we have all this power, in our fingertips, user power. So I think it is different this time. I don't think it's just hype. Um, where I think it's really exciting is I think that it's got the potential to get rid of a lot of the grunt work. So many people I work with now are really overloaded. I mean, Matt, they're in back-to-back meetings. They never have time to think or just to be creative, because they're just in the grind. And I think AI has a great potential to ease that for sure. Um, potentially make a much better place. I think we got to think about, well, what is the meaning of work? If we do have all these powerful tools, then where do we come in as human beings? What is going to be our role? So that's kind of almost an existential kind of question. But I
Yeah.
think that's exciting.
No, I think it's exciting too, and we've actually covered this topic with a number of the guests. It does keep coming up, and rightfully so. I think it is
Yeah.
so prevalent for consultancy leaders right now. I think many would find themselves on that cusp of fear and excitement. A
Yes.
fear for this, what we see as maybe the new diamond shape of consultancy rather than the pyramid. And but as you said, the grunt work, if that's made easier, then of course I think that allows us to be a bit more strategic in our businesses, and and push forward and focus on the really high impact stuff. Do you think are there any other sort of challenges that you foresee for the consultancy industry in the coming years? Perhaps it's the threat side of AI, or is there anything else we need to be looking at?
Well, I mean, I think there is. I think there is what we found in our research on leadership was whenever you get a big shock in the environment, and so there's a lot of change and it's large and it's unpredictable, then you get a polarization of performance. So some organizations really take off and excel, some just go under, and most and the few in the middle go either way. So you get polarization. So that's a challenge and a threat, obviously. I think if you put your head in the sand and say this isn't happening, I think you're definitely in danger. I think you've got to get on top of it. I mean, someone told me that something like 75% of consultants are already using Gen AI in their work, and they're not telling anyone, or not always telling anyone. That's a massive risk.
And I
So
think
yeah.
well, you and I were both at the Consultancy Growth Summit recently, and we
Yeah.
heard about this. One thing that really stuck with me is this idea that people think that AI is cheating, especially when it comes to consultancy. That if we're using it to inform our, presentations and decks, and even the work that we're doing with clients, that it's seen as cheating. What's your view on that?
Well, I just think it's a new paradigm, isn't it? And like any new paradigm, there's lots of bits to fill in. There's all sorts of things like there's privacy, there's a risk well, the risk of AI, having its hallucinations, just lying to you. There are so many risks out there, and we haven't got a framework for it yet. So that understandably, I mean, like if you listen to some of the universities, some of them are saying completely ban it. If you use any kind of AI, that's you're done with. And others are saying, no, actually, you've got to learn how to use it. I'm very much I think that the people that are going to win and the organizations that are going to win will work out how to collaborate with AI, because there's loads of stuff AI can't do yet anyway. And it's all the connections, the relationships. The other thing I think it really isn't very good at, it can't kind of create context. So when you're talking to you're trying to sell an idea to a client, you take so many different things into account: the culture, what's going on for that client personally, the tone of it, the trust. AI can't do any of that stuff. So if you get really, really good at that and you use AI, then I think you're putting yourself in the best possible position.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to have in your toolkit for sure. Chris, what do you see as the biggest myth about consultancy that you'd like to perhaps debunk?
It's a bit of a hobby horse of mine, because when I was first getting into consultancy, I was like I said, I was really young, and I like, oh God, have I got any credibility with these people? And I think it's a myth that you've got to have decades of experience and grey hair. And quite a lot of my consultants used to say to me, oh, but I look young, I haven't got the credibility. And I would just say, well, look, you have to work out the value that you've got that the client doesn't have. You do this for a living, they don't. Okay, you can't do their job, but they can't do yours either. So just build that confidence that you do have value to add, even if you're not massively experienced. So that would be my kind of little gripe, I guess.
What other advice would you have? Because I mean, obviously, we have people at all kind of ends of the spectrum of consultancy life who listen in. For those who are just starting out, looking to get into consultancy, many of them might be starting a consultancy solely around their use of ChatGPT, and maybe this is their entry,
Yeah.
pass, if you like. But what piece of advice have you got for somebody who perhaps young Chris, back at the very start? What advice would you give to yourself?
Well, I think because I moved into a very different area, because I was suddenly in this leadership development space that I didn't know anything about. I was an IT person, um, and I looked around me and I could see all these people that been there 30 years, and they worked their way up, and I thought, well, I'm not waiting 30 years to do your job. So the approach I took is go and find out what is the real leading edge thinking. Where is the real kind of cutting edge in your your sphere, and get really good at that, and you can like leapfrog a lot of this other stuff. So I would I think that's still the case now. Where's the cutting edge? Where's the leading edge?
Yeah.
And definitely, I mean, for someone just entering in now, it would definitely being really digitally fluent. It's going to put you in a category above a lot of other people already.
Yeah, and
Um,
you mentioned the communication of that value and having that confidence to convey it. And I still see a lot of consultancies that really do struggle to explain their value proposition in a lot of cases. What are your reflections on that?
oh well, I mean, I think that one thing I learned is that when we were trying to when we built our business and someone wanted to know what we did, I needed about an hour to tell them. Yeah, because I want to tell them all about our research and I just what I've discovered, and this is obviously this is what you live and breathe, but you've got to be able to state really in a really simple, impactful way what you do, so that someone could go and sell you. Could based on what you tell me your business is, could I go and explain it to someone else? Because if not, then you're not thinking about the end user, you're thinking about yourself. So people often will be telling you all the things that they're really good at and what they're wonderful at. Well, that's making you the hero, isn't it? And you want to make the client the hero. So yeah, I'm really a believer. I think getting a really sharp proposition is essential.
I love that. It's rarely about the person in front of you. It's about who they know and who they come across in their own journey as well.
Yes.
Chris, I'm keen to because I know that you obviously that life in leadership development that you've spent as well. We experience this kind of area around emotional intelligence keeps coming to the fore when it comes to discussing consultancy leadership. How important is emotional intelligence in running a successful consultancy? How do you develop that as well?
Um, I think it's more important than ever, actually. To the point about how do you complement, tech. Um, if you think about it, so we focused on behaviors, the things that you can observe leaders doing, and how you would give feedback that on and develop those behaviors that lead to high performance. But if you, in a way, that's the tip of the iceberg.
Mm.
And underneath the iceberg, there's a whole lot of other things going on. There's your values, your beliefs, your feelings, your emotions, even your physiology. And I think, emotional intelligence is about being able to understand and manage your own emotional state. And then you can then positively impact other people's emotional states. It's like a superpower. It really is. But I think for so many people that live in their head, they've no idea what they're feeling or why. So they're open to you're a hostage to triggers, aren't you? Someone can say something to you and you're really angry or, really sad, or, you're not actually taking responsibility for your own emotions, and therefore you can't possibly help other people with theirs.
Yeah, wonderful. Chris, on the Consultancy Edge, we have a bit of a feature that we do on each one of our interviews. Snog, marry, avoid. Not in the traditional sense, I have to add. So a snog in this instance is a quick win. What's one
Yeah.
quick win in consultancy that everyone should know about, according to you, Chris?
I'm sorry, we've already sort of covered it, but I just think the quick win is test your proposition. Can you and all the people that work with you really succinctly and with impact state what you do and why anyone should talk to you? So it's a very quick win. Actually, sorting it out is probably a bit more of bit more than a snog, but
Yeah.
yeah, that would be my quick win, definitely.
In a way that people can parrot to anybody that they meet, of course. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
So the marry is an essential. What's one tool, strategy, or practice that you absolutely couldn't live without?
It's building long-term trusting relationships. Whether it's the people that work for you, whether it's your clients, you never know when you're going to come back and meet them again. And I must admit, when people in the early days, when people left my business, I was a little bit right, off you go, and then I actually realized, no, this is crazy. These people, I mean, they would sometimes come back as clients. They'd sometimes, you'd see them, you'd meet people again that you just didn't know where you're going to meet them. So for me, always build good long-term relationships, and build your kind of your community, your alumni.
I love that. I love that. And lastly, what about something to avoid or ditch? What's one thing in your consultancy practice that you realized you needed to ditch as quickly as possible?
Saying yes to everything. You know, because I'm good at this, and you want that. Oh, I can do that as well. Oh, yes, and I can do that as well. You've really got to work out what you say yes to and what you really don't say yes to. Thinking you can do everything. Some people really struggle with this, especially founders, actually, because often they can, but that isn't going to build a super impactful business. You've got to focus on, what you're really good at.
Absolutely. I love that. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks so much for joining us on the Consultancy Edge.
You're very welcome, Matt. Really nice to talk to you too.